I published a video late last night using David Pakman's feigned ignorance about how to pronounce the word APAC as an opportunity to draw attention to how Trump and Bibi have created a famine in Gaza, how Israel has been knowingly restricting calories for Palestinians as far back as 2006. In that video, I said that famines are a man-made tool of war, a tool of genocide. They are entirely preventable. They're not just natural disasters, and that I think a lot of Americans have a misconception about famines. We think it's just something that happens and, oh, it's a terrible tragedy, but it's just a natural occurrence. And that's not true. It is entirely preventable, and it is a man-made construct. And I've done a number of videos on this subject in the past, 3 of them just a month or 2 ago, that didn't get any traction. They're on my YouTube. They got very few views. I was talking about hunger crises in general, the famine in Sudan, and the famine in Gaza in 3 separate videos, and very, very few people saw those. But a lot of people saw my video about David Pakman, which is why I used him as an opportunity to draw attention to the issue, because I knew that it was a hot story in the headlines, at least on social media. And I could leverage that story to draw attention to the issue of the famine in Gaza. So anyway, in the comments of that video, I got a bunch of people saying that no, famines are natural disasters. And several people used Ethiopia as an example. Let me read just one of those comments because it so perfectly illustrates the point that I'm trying to make, that Americans have been propagandized to believe that famines are natural disasters when they're not. It's not fair to say that famines are man-made. What about the starving kids in places like Ethiopia? You see those starving African children because they live in an area that just doesn't have food, not because someone's keeping food from them, but it's still called a famine. I got several comments like this, but I thought this one was the clearest example of how y'all don't understand what a famine is. And that's because you've been intentionally misled probably your whole life. I'm going to say right up front that I'm not an expert on Ethiopian history, but I would consider myself somewhat of an expert on food justice, food distribution systems, hunger crises, and how we feed people. And again, I'm in my mid-40s. A lot of us grew up hearing about the famine in Ethiopia, and we really thought it was just because of a drought. We really thought it was because these are poor people in Africa who live in an area that just can't sustain them. I want to explain what a famine actually is versus what you've been taught, and then I want to briefly touch on the famine in Ethiopia. What is happening in Sudan right now is a famine. What is happening in Gaza right now is a famine. A famine is extreme food deprivation. It is the final stage of a hunger crisis. A hunger crisis can be caused by a natural disaster, such as a flood, such as a drought, but a famine is man-made and entirely preventable.